Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy, speaking to you from the land of Israel. I represent Brit-Am, our organisation researches the whereabouts of the lost 10 tribes. And we have found the lost 10 tribes amongst Western nations. We have proven it. We have proven it from the Bible, from the Hebrew Bible, from rabbinical commentators on the Bible, from history in general, historical sources, mythology, archaeology, and numerous other fields of studies. And we have shown out all these different fields and means of inquiry all come together, all bring proofs that converge and interlock with each other and supplement each other and give us a composite picture, proving that the descendants of lost in tribes, wherever else they may be, in concentrated entities that gave expression to themselves according to their Israelite origins, are to be found amongst Western nations, amongst the peoples of Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Switzerland, Northern Ireland, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, and the offshoots of these nations overseas, such as the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, and other areas. That is where the lost tribes are to be found. We do not say that everyone there is descendant from Israelites. That is where the lost tribes went to. It's where their descendants came to and are still there and still influence the areas there, and they comprise a not insignificant proportion of the population in those regions. And we have proven it, and we go on proving it. We prove it all the time. We bring more and more proofs, but there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do. There's too much work to do, but we keep on working at it, and we've been working at it for decades. And we make progress. Bit by bit, we're spreading the message, and the message is getting out there, and we are countering claims against it, or coping with them, facing up to them, examining them. We do not dismiss anything anyone says. If someone says something against us, we check into it. And usually, more often than not, the final result is additional proofs strengthening what we say. All this activity, it requires funding. It needs effort. It takes effort out of us. Takes resources out of us. We need backing for this, and we get backing. But there's always room for more, and the backing is never enough, because there's always more and more needs. Because there's always more and more needs, more challenges for the future, daily costs, daily expenses, also obligations that have accrued from the past, and our own maintenance of this project. So those who are able are requested, if they're so prepared, to support us, to go to our website, and from the website to see how they can send money to us, and to do so. Now we're getting to the subject of today. Coming to the subject of today, it concerns the story of Joseph and his brothers in Egypt. And we have already seen in previous videos in this series a biblical story, how Joseph was one of the favorite sons of Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, so 12 sons of Jacob. And these 12 sons were the ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. And these 12 sons, out of these 12 sons, only 2 of them, Benjamin and Joseph, were the sons of Rachel, the favorite wife of Jacob. And Rachel had died, and so Joseph had only these 2 sons to remind him of his favorite wife. And he gave Joseph a cottonette pasim, that is a cloak of a tartan type design of many colours. And we showed how this was in fact similar to the Scottish tartan design that exists today, and it denoted a rank. The cloak that Joseph received denoted rank and indicated that he was considered to have a ranking somewhere above that of his brothers. Also, he had dreams. that indicated that the brothers would in the future bow down to him. And on top of that, he also brought a bad report, bad things, bad claims against his brothers, or against some of his brothers, saying that they had acted incorrectly with the local women, and that they were eating the equivalent of a non-kosher food, food that had not been slaughtered in the correct fashion, and possibly other things. And the term used for this report, etymologically shows that it was false, it was mistaken. It was not a good report in itself. He, in effect, is saying falsities against them. He's saying bad things against them that were not true, and that were liable to endanger them and their families. And they judged him as someone who was pursuing them and a danger to them, and they decided to murder him. And when they saw him coming in the distance, coming to join them whilst they were out in the fields in the vicinity of Shechem, he was sent by his father to join up with them whilst they were looking up to the flocks. They saw him in the distance and they said, let's murder him. And after having judged him guilty of murder, of death, to take him out, one could say, in a preemptive fashion, for preemptive purposes, they decided to go ahead and do what they had already agreed upon. But Reuben persuaded them not to. He said, after all, he's our brother, just put him in a pit and let the beasts of the field kill him. They did not lack beasts of the field at that time that could do this. There were wild lions about, as we find in the Bible. Also, archaeology and related studies of natural science show that at that time there were lions, wild cats, wild bears, wolves, all kinds of creatures running around that could harm human beings. And Joseph in a pit would be vulnerable, and he would be there without food, without water. He would not last long. The elements would destroy him, or one of the creatures of the field would destroy him. And that was what they intended to do. That was what the suggestion that Reuben made, but Reuben made the suggestion in order that they should put him in the pit, and then his plan was that he would come back later, pull Joseph up out of the pit and bring him back to his father. And the brothers agreed to it, and apparently they grabbed Joseph, put him in the pit, and then Reuben went away. Meanwhile, a caravan came by, a caravan of Ishmaelites and Midianites came by, and Joseph said, instead of letting him die, let's sell him to this caravan going down to Egypt. And they did so. So they sold Joseph to the caravan going down to Egypt, and Joseph was taken there to Egypt and sold as a slave in Egypt. And meanwhile, the brothers took his cloak, which they soaked in the blood of a goat they slaughtered, and brought the coat to their father. And the father agreed that apparently a wild beast took the coat to their father, Jacob, and Jacob drew the conclusion that a wild beast had killed Joseph. Meanwhile, Reuben had gone back to the pit to draw Joseph out and found that he wasn't there. He was somewhat distraught about that. He saw that Reuben, in effect, was never let in the secret. He always believed that Joseph had indeed been killed by the brothers or by a wild beast, and that and he wasn't aware that there's a chance that Joseph was still alive. We have a question concerning the role of Judah. How culpable was Judah? How guilty was Judah? We see that Judah was something of a leader amongst the brothers. And it stands to reason that he would have been amongst those who judged Joseph to be guilty of pursuing them, looking for them, one could say, wanting to harm them, and therefore in principle worthy to be put to death. Later, it is Judah who suggests that instead of leaving him to die, they should sell him to the caravan going down to Egypt. And there have been claims made against Judah. They say that we see here that Judah was something of a leader. What Judah said, what Judah proposed, was accepted by the brothers. It was also, he was capable of persuading their father Jacob to let Benjamin go with him back to Egypt when Reuben was not able to persuade him. Judah was a person with a voice. So they said that, seeing that he had this thing about him, his mode of persuadability, of persuasiveness, so too if he had have said to the brothers, let us return him to our father and not do him any harm, they would have listened to him. And that is the direction some of the commentators go in. And some of the major commentators have gone in this direction, and saying that Judah was culpable. There's even in the Talmud, in Sanhedrin 6, there's a saying that says, that has been translated as saying, anyone who blesses Judah is blaspheming. And this has been understood to mean anyone that says that Judah did a good thing when he sold Joseph, when he persuaded them to sell Joseph, is blaspheming. He is saying something that is wrong, morally wrong. That Judah should have did what he could. Judah should have did what he could to return Joseph to their father, and is not to be blessed for having saved Joseph, one could say, for having left Joseph in the hole. But there are others who say that this is not correct, and they say that the truth is that the way that Talmud expresses itself can also be interpreted in the opposite direction. Anyone who condemns Judah is blaspheming. So we have these two differences of opinion. So how do we explain the second opinion, that anyone who condemns Judah is blaspheming, that Judah was in the right? Because Judah knew his brothers, he knew the situation, and he in effect was making a suggestion that was the only way out, the only possibility that he saw before him. They had already agreed to put him to death. They had a council, they had a kind of court session, and they had agreed that Joseph deserved to be killed. And the question was just how were they going to do about it? And then Judah came up with the idea that instead of letting him die, they should sell him. And if he had have asked them to restore Joseph, this would have been contrary to everything they had agreed upon, everything that had gone beforehand, and also would have involved their father Jacob, Israel. Jacob was also known as Israel. It would have involved him knowing what had happened, how they had seized hold of Joseph by force, stripped his clothing off him, tore up his clothing, dipped his clothing in blood, and the blood of a goat, and brought it to him and led him to believe that a wild animal had killed him and caused him enormous grief, made him distraught with misery on this matter, and also done violence to his son, and not only that, but had initially intended to murder him, and there would have been no end of problems. The brothers had seized hold of Joseph and placed him in a pit because they thought that Joseph was threatening their position, was a threat to them and their family, so they put him in the pit, and initially they had intended to kill him, but then Reuben persuaded them to put him in a pit and let the elements and the wild animals destroy him. Whereas Reuben intended to come, and then Reuben intended to leave the scene and then return later and take Joseph back out of the pit. Meanwhile, the brothers who remained, they sat down to eat, and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites and Midianites passing by. So Judah suggested that instead of causing the death of Joseph, they sell him to the caravan going down to Egypt, and at least their hands would be clean of bloodshed, of killing their brother. And so Judah has been condemned for this. Why didn't he use his talent, his gift of persuasion, his natural leadership qualities to return Joseph to his father? But this was not practical. It was impossible. It would possibly have caused the brothers to have been cursed by their father, to be dispossessed by them, and that in their eyes Joseph was culpable, at least to some degree, and they would not have been psychologically able to take such a step. But they were prepared to do what Judah suggested, and to sell Joseph. So they sold Joseph. And if anyone has any doubts, we should go to the blessing of Jacob. Jacob, the father of the tribes, Jacob known as Israel. Jacob, when he was dying, he called all the tribes together, he called the brothers together, and he gave each one their own blessing, and then he blessed Judah. And he said in Genesis 49 verse 8 onwards, it goes, Judah, you are he in whom your brothers shall praise, shall own up to, shall acknowledge. In the Hebrew, your hands shall be on the neck of your enemies, your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp, the son of a lion. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter, that is a gift of rulership, shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. Shiloh is the future Messiah, son of David. Till Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people, the gathering of the people, the gathering of the tribes, binding his donkey to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine, and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. So, going back on what we have read, we saw a verse, Judah is a lion's whelp, the son of a lion. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. What is it? What is Jacob speaking of here? From the prey, my son, you have gone up. This may be understood as saying, not that my son is not referring to Judah, but rather to Joseph. From the prey, from that was about to be devoured, that which was about to be devoured by wild beasts, to be destroyed, that was my son Joseph, and you went up, you saved him. And Rashi also agrees with this, that Judah had in effect worked to save Joseph from being left in the pit and devoured by a wild beast. And Jacob, when he was giving the blessing, he blessed Judah because of this. So this exonerates Judah, at least to some degree. So we should remember this. We should also note that it was Simeon and Levi apparently who put the plot together, who were the primary movers in the plot against Joseph. That was why when Joseph sent the brothers back the first time, he kept Simeon with him as a surety that they should return. And another reason for doing this was, as Rashi points out, and as Mark McGee also mentioned to us, that he wanted to separate Simeon from Levi because they were brothers. They acted as brothers. They are referred to in the Bible as brothers, and they acted together and coordinated their actions, and they proved themselves capable of doing or carrying out actions of their own when they destroyed the whole city of Shechem, virtually single-handed. And so that was another reason why Joseph kept Shimeon back when he sent the brothers home, to separate him from Levi, that Shimeon and Levi should not work together. And that is also why when Jacob blessed the brothers, he referred to Shimeon and Levi as brothers, acting together brothers, and that tools of violence are their way of life, that they had a natural aptitude for taking partisan type actions. And we saw this also in the later Maccabees, the Hashmonaim, who fought against the Seleucid Greeks, which was a formidable empire, one of the major empires in the world history, the Seleucids. And the Hasmoneans fought against them and eventually defeated them. And they were from the tribe of Levi. So that's what we have. At all events, when Judah remonstrated with Joseph and revealed to him what the state of affairs was, how important Benjamin was to their father, and how their father would be affected if anything happened to him, and he himself showed himself prepared to give his life in order for that not to happen. So Joseph broke down. He began to cry, as the Bible explains to us, and then he spoke to the brothers, and he said to them, then Joseph said to his brothers, Genesis 45, I am Joseph, is my father still alive? His brothers could not answer, for they were dismayed, they were ashamed at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brethren, please come closer to me. And they came closer, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you have sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life, for the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there's still 5 years in which we neither ploughing nor harvesting. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth, and to keep you alive and by a great deliverance. Now therefore was not you who sent me here, but God, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household and power of all the land of Egypt. Hurry up and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall live in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children and your flocks and your herds and all that you have. There I will provide for you. There are still 5 years of famine to come, and you and your household and all that you have would be impoverished. Behold, your eyes see, and even the eyes of my brother Benjamin see. That is my mouth which is speaking to you. Now you must tell my father of all my splendor in Egypt and all that you have seen, and you must hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept all on them, and afterwards his brothers talked with him. So, in effect, Joseph has put Judah and the other brothers through an act of catharsis, a purifying act. He had caused them pain, he had caused them grief, he had caused them to be prepared to give their lives for their brother Benjamin. And in effect they had gone through similar feelings as those to which Joseph had when they sold him. And now he was reconciled to them. And they were given grain, the family was given grain. Jacob, the father, was informed as to what had happened. Then Jacob, all members of his extended family, 70 altogether, 70 sons and grandsons and all their families, so went down to Egypt and they dwelt there. See Genesis 45, 8-27. They were given the land of Goshen, east of the Nile, to dwell in, Genesis 47, 4-7. And then Jacob blessed Joseph and his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, Genesis 48. Before he died, Jacob blessed all the tribes, Genesis 49. After Jacob's death, the brothers were afraid that Joseph would take revenge on them for what they had done to him. because they saw what happened with Esau, their uncle. You remember that Jacob had disguised himself as Esau, and he came before his father Isaac. Isaac was blind, and Jacob had been pretended to be Esau, and he had received the blessing of Esau. And then Esau came in just as Jacob went out, and he learned what had happened, and he was very angry. And it says that he was waited for his father to die in order that he could take a revenge on Jacob and kill him. Their mother Rebecca heard of this, and she spoke to Isaac, and they both agreed to send Jacob away. So Jacob was sent away to Brit-Am, to the house of Laban, the brother of his mother, and there he married Leah and Rachel. And that was when the whole family history began. So we see here that Esau, their uncle, had waited for the death of Isaac, the father of himself and of Jacob, in order to kill Jacob. And now the brothers were afraid lest Joseph would have been doing the same. He'd been waiting for Jacob to die in order to take revenge on the brothers for what they had done to him. Perhaps he still kept something with him, some resentment, a thirst for revenge, a natural need to make up, to redeem his honor that had been impugned by making him helpless and selling him to foreign people, to take him down to a foreign country of pagans and leaving him alone and mistreating him and so on. So they sent a message to Joseph asking him to have mercy on them, and Joseph replied, and he placated them. Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore do not be afraid, I will provide for you and your little ones." So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. And so note the expression, "you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." In the Hebrew original could be interpreted as meaning, "you thought wrongly, God took it for good." The brothers had held a kind of tribunal, and they had found Joseph guilty. From their point of view, what they had done had been correct. As far as they knew, Joseph really was plotting against them. They were preempting the danger against them. And even though they had been mistaken, they had thought wrongly, a good result had come from it. It shows that their intention had been an honest one, or there was some good in it, for good to have come out of it. And there's a principle that when a rabbinical court acts properly, even if it is mistaken, the result is still worthwhile and should be adhered to. We have in Deuteronomy 17, it says, "If any case is too difficult for you to decide between one kind of homicide or another, between one kind of lawsuit or another, and between one kind of assault or another, being cases of dispute in your courts, then you shall rise and go up to the place which the Lord your God chooses. So you shall come to the Levites and the Kohaths and the judge, who was in office in those days, and you shall inquire of them, and they shall declare to you the verdict in the case. And you shall inquire of them, they shall declare to you the verdict in the case. You shall do according to the terms of the verdict which they declare to you from the place which the Lord chooses. You shall be careful to observe according to all that they teach you, according to the terms of the law which they teach you, and according to the verdict which they tell you, you shall do. You shall not turn aside from the word which they declare to you to the right or to the left. The man who acts presumptuously but not listening to the priest who stands there to serve the Lord your God, nor to the judge, that man shall die, that you shall purge the evil from Israel. Then all the people will hear and be afraid and will not act presumptuously again." That's an English translation. It's relatively speaking reliable. That is what the Hebrew says. And we see from this that you have to do what you have to do according to the lights before you. And even if you are mistaken, God will guide you, be with you. And if you have had good intentions, correct intentions, the results will always be positive. So too in the case of Joseph, the brothers had, according to their lights, judged him wrongly, but the intentions had not been incorrect, and so the ultimate result was the salvation of themselves, of their families, and of a good portion of the world as it existed at that time. Katav Sofer, in 1871, he relates to these, and he was the son of the Hatim Sofer. The Hatim Sofer was the one who, as we saw, said that in the end times, in the time of the Messianic age, the areas of Western Europe and of England, the British Isles, shall be part of Israel, which helps us, confirms to us that the Israelites are in that area, and that will be made known to them. And his son, the son of the Hatim Sofer, was known as the Katav Sofer. His name was Abraham Shmuel Binyamin Sofer, and he lived in Hungary, and he discussed this matter of the selling of Joseph, and this is how he explained what Joseph was saying. Joseph was in effect saying that your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, that is my mouth which is speaking to you. That Joseph, when Joseph said, you are seeing, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see. Why is he putting Benjamin in the equation? Because Benjamin wasn't there. Benjamin wasn't there when they sold him. Benjamin was at home with his father Jacob. He knew nothing about it. In the same way, I can't have a grudge against Benjamin, who didn't even know what was going on, and could not have been involved. So do I not have a grudge against you? You and he are the same in my eyes, and you are equally exonerated and not guilty of any wrongdoing in this matter. That was what Joseph said. And Rashi also confirms this.